My name is Linda Carver, and the most painful words I've ever heard from my own child weren't in anger. They were in cold, casual dismissal. Mom, you're just a server. It's not exactly noble work. You know, trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. That night, those words echoed in my head long after she'd left the room. Not noble work. I had been sitting at the kitchen table still wearing my diner apron. My shift had ended late, and I'd brought home a slice of lemon meringue pie for her knowing it was her favorite. But she barely glanced at it. She had just gotten off a video call with her friends, and the smug, almost bored expression she wore still lingered on her face. I asked about her day at the university, and she replied between sips of sparkling water. Fine. But honestly, Mom, sometimes I wish you had aimed higher in life. Like, I don't want to end up serving coffee to strangers. She didn't say it to hurt me, at least not directly. She said it like she was stating a fact. And somehow, that was worse. I've worked at Maple Grove Diner for 12 years now. My job isn't glamorous, but I've never seen it as something shameful. In fact, in its own way, it's a profession that demands grace under pressure, a smile when you're tired, and the ability to read people like a book. But to my daughter Claire, it was something lesser. She was in her second year of studying business administration, full of theories about market success and career ladders. She'd absorbed the idea that value is measured by titles and the size of your paycheck. When she was younger, she used to sit at the corner booth doing her homework while I worked, sipping free hot chocolate the cook would make for her. She loved the diner back then. She even said she wanted to help me one day. But teenage years and then university had changed her. She started seeing my world through a filter of embarrassment. That night, after she went to bed, I sat in the quiet kitchen staring at my own reflection in the window. My hands were tired, the knuckles slightly swollen from years of balancing heavy trays and gripping coffee pots. But I also saw something else, a woman who had kept a roof over their heads, who had made sure her daughter never missed a meal, who had paid for Claire's tuition without taking out a single loan. Not noble work. I wondered what she thought noble even meant. Did she think it was only found in glass towers and corner offices? Couldn't it also be found in someone who serves food with kindness, who listens to a lonely customer's stories, who works double shifts to pay the bills? The next morning, the air between us was cold. She breezed into the kitchen in a fitted blazer and heels. She was giving a presentation in class that day, and didn't even glance at me as she poured herself coffee. "Don't you have work?" she asked flatly. "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Double shift today." She made a face. "That's exhausting. You should think about doing something more, you know, career-like. Career-like." I bit back the urge to say something sharp. Instead, I simply picked up my keys and headed to the car. When I got to the diner, the familiar comfort of the place wrapped around me. The smell of fresh coffee, the low hum of the grill, the clink of cutlery on ceramic plates. My coworker Sam was already refilling sugar jars. He looked up. "You look like you've got a storm cloud over your head," he said. I shrugged. "My daughter thinks my job isn't noble enough." He snorted. "Well, tell her the cops, nurses, and half the town eat here because of us. If that's not noble, I don't know what is." The day went on as usual. I served regulars who knew me by name, tourists who thanked me for my kindness, and a young man who was nervous about proposing to his girlfriend over breakfast. I slipped him an extra plate of pancakes shaped like hearts, and pretended it was on the house so he could focus on his moment. These were the little things, the unglamorous, invisible things that my daughter would never see from the outside. But still, her words sat in my chest like a stone. That night, she didn't come home for dinner. I found out from social media that she'd gone to a rooftop restaurant with her friends, posting photos of cocktails and artfully plated pasta. One of her captions read, "Manifesting my future life. No more small town, small dream energy." Small town, small dream. She meant me. I knew it. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I sat in the living room with the lights low and thought about all the sacrifices she'd never known. The career I'd walked away from, the opportunities I'd turned down, the hours I'd spent cleaning, cooking, and working so she could grow up without knowing the ache of hunger or the humiliation of eviction notices. She thought I was standing still in life. What she didn't realize was that I'd already fought battles she couldn't even imagine, and chosen a life where my dignity remained intact. That night, I decided something. I wasn't going to defend myself with words anymore. I was going to let my actions and my results speak for me. And one day soon she would see exactly what noble looked like. 2 days later, the storm broke in the most awkward way possible over a dinner that was supposed to be quiet. It was a Wednesday evening. I had cooked roasted chicken with rosemary potatoes, a small indulgence since I had a rare afternoon off. I set the table, carefully mismatched plates but polished silverware. Candles lit soft music in the background. I wanted, perhaps foolishly, to remind Claire that we could have moments of grace even without expensive restaurants. She came home late, bringing two of her university friends with her, both polished young women, one in a silk blouse, the other with designer sunglasses perched on her head. I had never met them before. "Mom, this is Danielle and Kira Claire," said with that quick, dismissive wave she used when she was already half turned toward someone else. "We're just grabbing dinner before finishing a group project." I smiled and welcomed them in, motioning for them to sit. The roast chicken was golden, the smell filling the whole kitchen. I carved generous portions for each of them, ladling gravy over the meat, sliding the potatoes onto their plates. They thanked me politely, but there was something in their tone, a slight stiffness, like they were trying too hard not to notice something. Halfway through the meal, Danielle asked, "So, Mrs. Carver, what do you do?" Before I could answer, Claire jumped in. "She works at a diner. She's, the head server there." I noticed the pause before head server, like she was trying to make it sound more impressive than she thought it was. Danielle gave a polite, "Oh," and Kira nodded, but didn't ask anything more. The conversation drifted toward internships, networking events, and professors who had connections in the industry. Every few minutes, someone's phone buzzed with notifications. I listened quietly, chewing slowly, resisting the urge to interrupt with my own stories, because I knew they wouldn't care. But then Claire, without even looking at me, said something that landed like a slap. "I mean, I know I'll never be in food service. No offense, Mom, but I want a career that's, you know, impactful." The room went silent for a moment, the word impactful hanging in the air like a bad smell. I could feel heat creeping up my neck. I wanted to ask her what she thought impact looked like, if she thought keeping a diner running during snowstorms, feeding first responders, or being the person regulars trusted to remember their anniversaries wasn't impact. But I didn't. Instead, I kept eating. Because sometimes the silence is louder than anything you can say. After dinner, I started clearing plates. Kira offered to help, but Claire quickly waved her off. "Oh no, she's used to it." I don't think she realized how cruel that sounded. When they left, the kitchen felt bigger, emptier. The candle flames flickered in the draft from the door. I stood at the sink, my hands deep in soapy water, staring at the chicken bones on the platter. I thought about the customers who called me by name, the teenagers I'd trained, who'd gone on to their own careers, the couple who'd gotten engaged at the diner because they said it felt like home. None of that counted in Claire's eyes because it didn't fit the version of success she'd been taught to admire. The next morning, Sam noticed my mood again as we set up the diner. "You're chewing the air," he said, sliding a stack of menus onto the counter. I told him about the dinner, and he just shook his head. "You know what her problem is? She's only ever seen your job from the outside. She's never seen you in action." That thought stuck with me. Maybe Sam was right. Maybe my daughter needed to see me not as her mom who wears an apron, but as Linda Carver, the woman who could run a floor at full capacity on a Sunday brunch rush without breaking a sweat. That Friday, fate handed me an opening. The diner was short-staffed and we had a big catering order for a local charity event. I texted Claire telling her I could use a hand delivering some baked goods after her class. She didn't reply for hours. Then, fine, but only because I have nothing else to do. When she walked in, she was wearing heels and a cream-colored coat, looking utterly out of place among the clatter of dishes and the smell of sizzling bacon. She stood awkwardly near the counter, scrolling on her phone. I handed her a tray of pies to load into the car. She wrinkled her nose. "This is heavy." "Yes," I said evenly. "It's work." We arrived at the community center where volunteers were setting up tables. People greeted me warmly, calling out Linda from across the room. I introduced Claire, but most of the attention stayed on me, asking if we'd brought the pecan pies, if I'd made the cornbread myself, if we'd be coming to the raffle later. Claire's expression shifted just slightly from boredom to confusion. We unloaded the trays, and the event coordinator, a woman named Gloria, took my hands and said, "I don't know what we'd do without you, Linda. You've been keeping this event going for years." I caught Claire watching that exchange. She didn't say anything, but her eyes lingered on me longer than usual. On the way back, she asked quietly, "Do you do this kind of thing a lot?" "Yes," I said. "And not because I have to, because it matters." She didn't respond, but her phone stayed in her lap instead of in her hand for the rest of the drive. That night, I thought about the subtle shift I'd seen in her face. It wasn't an apology, not yet. But maybe she was beginning to see that there was more to my life than she had allowed herself to believe. And I knew then if I wanted to change her perception, I'd have to let her witness more. Not by telling her, but by showing her. The Saturday after that community center delivery, I woke up before dawn, as usual. Habit. Years of early shifts had trained my body clock to beat the alarm. I brewed coffee, pulled on my work shoes, the ones with cushioned soles that had carried me through 1,000 steps a day, and stared for a moment at the empty hallway outside Claire's bedroom. I wondered if she'd ever realize the rhythm of my life wasn't an accident, but a choice I made to keep our home steady. The diner was already humming when I arrived. The smell of frying bacon and fresh cinnamon rolls met me at the door. Sam was wiping down the coffee machine, and Marta, the cook, was already elbow-deep in pancake batter. It was the breakfast rush. Families, truck drivers, and couples filled the booths. The kind of crowd where you have to keep track of 15 orders in your head while smiling like you've got all the time in the world. I moved through the room in that familiar dance: refill coffee here, grab a plate there, slide a fresh omelet onto a table just as the toast pops in the kitchen. It's a rhythm you can't fake. It comes from years of listening, anticipating, moving without hesitation. Midway through the rush, I saw a face I didn't expect: Claire. She was standing just inside the door, scanning the room, clearly looking for me. She spotted me and hesitated, as if unsure whether to interrupt. I waved her over between orders. "What's wrong?" I asked quickly, because the only time she came to the diner unannounced was when she needed something. "Nothing," she said. "I was just in the neighborhood." I doubted that. The university was 20 minutes away. But I didn't push. "Grab a seat," I told her. "I'll be with you in a minute." She slid into a corner booth. From across the room, I caught her watching me as I moved between tables. She saw me kneel to talk to Mrs. Thompson, one of our regulars who'd lost her husband last year. She saw me laugh with a group of high school kids as I brought them extra fries by mistake. She saw me carry a tray loaded with 6 plates without spilling a drop of coffee. When I finally got to her, she had that same puzzled expression I'd seen at the community center. "You're really busy," she said, as if surprised. "This is a slow morning," I replied. "You should see a sundae." I brought her a plate of blueberry pancakes on the house. She picked at them absent-mindedly while her eyes followed me back into the crowd. Half an hour later, the mayor of our small town walked in with his wife. They came straight to me, shook my hand, and asked if I'd be attending the charity auction next month. Claire's eyebrows rose slightly. It was dawning on her, I think, that I wasn't invisible here. That in this space, this diner, I mattered in ways her narrow definition of success didn't account for. When my shift ended, she was still at the booth scrolling through her phone. "Need a ride home?" I asked. She nodded and we walked to the car together. For once, she didn't put her earbuds in. "Do you like it?" she asked finally. "This job, I mean." I glanced at her. "Like it? No. I love it. It's hard, it's tiring, and some days people are rude. But I know what I'm doing makes a difference. And I sleep at night knowing I've worked honestly for everything we have." She didn't respond right away. She just stared out the window, her expression unreadable. The next week passed quietly. No barbed comments from her, no awkward silences at dinner. Then on Thursday, she texted me while I was at work. "Got an invite for a networking dinner. Want to come?" At first, I thought she meant she wanted me to drop her off. But no, she was inviting me as her guest. I almost said no. Those dinners were full of glossy conversations about industries I'd long since left behind, and I wasn't sure I wanted to be the only person there who knew how to balance a stack of plates better than a spreadsheet. But something told me to accept. That Friday night, I wore my best navy dress, the one I'd bought years ago for a cousin's wedding. Claire looked surprised when I walked out of my room, as if she'd expected me to show up in my work clothes. "You look nice," she said, a little grudgingly. At the dinner, I let her lead the introductions. I smiled, shook hands, and listened. But when one man started complaining about lazy service staff at his country club, I leaned in and asked, "Have you ever tried running a brunch shift for 80 people with only 3 servers?" The table laughed politely, but the man looked caught off guard. He didn't have an answer. On the drive home, Claire was unusually quiet again. Finally, she said, "You didn't seem out of place there." "Why would I?" I asked. "I've spent years reading people making them feel welcome. It's not that different from business networking, except I get better tips." She laughed softly, almost reluctantly. It wasn't an apology, but it was a crack in the wall she'd built between us. And I knew I could work with that. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the years ahead. Claire was going to keep moving in her own world, internships, degrees, the climb toward whatever she thought success looked like. But maybe, just maybe, I could make her see that there was another kind of ladder one built, not on titles, but on the respect you earn one person at a time. And if she couldn't see it yet, I was willing to be patient. Because I've been patient my whole life. It was a rainy Tuesday morning when the diner's front door chimed, and I looked up to see Claire standing there, umbrella dripping on the floor. She wasn't dressed for class. Instead, she wore an oversized sweater, leggings, and that faintly irritated expression she always had when she was somewhere she didn't want to be. "Car broke down," she said, as though that explained everything. "It's at the garage down the street. Can I wait here until it's ready?" "Of course," I said, because no matter how sharp her words could be, she was still my daughter. I motioned to a booth by the window where she could watch the rain slide down the glass. She sat scrolling through her phone while I went back to the counter to top off coffee cups. The diner was busy, a steady stream of regulars shaking rain off their coats. My voice slipped into its well-worn rhythm, greetings, orders, little jokes to lighten the gloom of the weather. At one point, I brought a plate of eggs to an elderly man named Harold, who had been eating breakfast here since before Claire was born. His wife had passed last year, and I'd made it a quiet mission to make sure he felt less alone. As I set the plate in front of him, he took my hand and said loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "Linda, I swear you're the only reason I come out on days like this. You make this place feel like home." I smiled and squeezed his hand. "Well, Harold, you keep showing up, and I'll keep making sure you're fed." The booth beside Harold's erupted in agreement, a young couple with a baby nodding and saying how much they appreciated me, always remembering their names and coffee orders. Someone else added, "You're a treasure, Linda. Don't ever leave this place." I caught Claire glancing up from her phone. For a split second, I thought I saw something soften in her expression, but just as quickly she rolled her eyes and looked back down at her screen. The moment passed, but I felt the strange tug of pride and frustration. She was hearing the truth from other people now, not just from me, yet instead of letting it in, she seemed to push it away. Later, when I brought her a hot chocolate, she looked at me and said, "They really like you here, don't they?" "Yes," I said, keeping my tone light. "They do." She took a sip, then added, "I mean, it's nice, but it's not like it's, you know, real influence. It's just small town stuff." There it was, again the dismissal. The invisible measuring stick she held where my life's work barely registered. I didn't argue. I'd learned that when she was in this mood, my words would just bounce off. By lunchtime, the garage called to say her car was ready. As she gathered her things, she glanced at me. "Thanks for letting me wait here," she said. "And for the hot chocolate." It wasn't gratitude exactly, but it was something. After she left, Marta gave me a look. "That girl doesn't know how lucky she is." "She's young," I said, wiping down a table. "She'll figure it out one day." I hoped I was right. The rest of the week passed quietly until Saturday night, when we had our monthly open mic evening at the diner, live music, poetry, even the occasional comedy act. It was one of those events that made the diner feel like the heart of the community. I didn't expect Claire to show up, but she came in with a friend sitting at the back. She didn't participate, didn't clap much, but she stayed until the end. When I walked over to her table to say goodnight, her friend smiled and said, "Your mom's amazing. Everyone here seems to know her." Claire just shrugged. "Yeah, she's been here a long time." Her friend glanced between us, sensing the tension. "Well, I think it's cool. Not many people can say they're actually part of the community like this." For a second, I thought Claire might smile. Instead, she mumbled something about being tired and headed for the door. That night, after I locked up, I sat in the empty diner with the lights dimmed, thinking about how slowly this was all unfolding. I had imagined that if she just saw me in my element, saw the respect, the trust, the connection, she would understand. But understanding wasn't something you could force. It had to slip in quietly, like rain soaking into the ground. I was beginning to realize that Claire wasn't just judging me for my job, she was afraid of my life. Afraid of ending up in a small town working hard for modest pay, surrounded by the same faces year after year. To her, that felt like a trap. To me, it felt like roots. What I didn't know then was that a moment was coming sooner than I thought, when those roots I'd planted in this town would prove stronger than she could have imagined. And it would happen in a way neither of us saw coming. I don't talk much about my life before the diner. It's not because I'm ashamed, though. For years I suppose I was. It's because the decision I made back then came with a cost I chose to carry alone. But that rainy Thursday night, when Claire once again made an offhand remark about how I'd never pushed myself and settled too soon, something inside me shifted. I realized maybe she thought my life had just happened to me. She didn't know I had once walked away from a path she would have called noble without a second thought. Years ago, when Claire was 6, I worked in the marketing department of a large corporate firm in the city. I wore pencil skirts and heels every day. My desk sat by a wall of windows with a skyline view. My business card had a crisp logo embossed in silver. From the outside, it looked like success. From the inside, it felt like quicksand. The pressure was relentless 70-hour weeks, clients who called at midnight, meetings where smiles were weapons. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself I was building a better life for Claire. But then came the scandal. A senior executive was caught embezzling funds, and to protect himself, he tried to shift blame onto lower-level managers, including me. I had nothing to do with it, but in corporate politics, innocence doesn't matter as much as convenience. One morning, I walked into a conference room to find 3 men in suits waiting for me. They advised me to sign a document taking partial responsibility, promising it would all quietly go away if I cooperated. I thought about Claire, her little hands clutching my neck when I tucked her in at night the way she trusted me without question. I thought about how this scandal could follow me for years if I stayed and fought. So I walked out. Just like that. No grand speech, no legal battle. I left my badge on the table, packed my things, and stepped into the rain without an umbrella. At first, I told myself I'd find another job just as good. But the city's corporate world is small, and whispers travel faster than truth. Job offers disappeared. Phone calls stopped being returned. I had a child to feed and rent to pay and savings that would only stretch so far. That's when I walked into Maple Grove Diner desperate for anything. The owner, Marlene, didn't ask for a resume. She just handed me an apron and said, "Can you carry a tray without dropping it?" I said yes. And I never left. The first year was humbling. I went from business lunches to mopping floors, from giving presentations to scrubbing ketchup off booths. But every day I went home knowing I had nothing to hide. No deals made in shadows. No signatures on papers I didn't believe in. It was honest work. And that honesty became my armor. I'd never told Claire any of this. In her mind, I'd always been just a server. The gap between who I had been and who I became was invisible to her. But that Thursday night after her latest jab, I decided she needed at least a glimpse. We were sitting in the living room, the TV on low. She was scrolling through her phone, half listening to some influencer talk about high-value careers. I muted the TV. "Claire," I said, "do you know what I did before the diner?" She glanced up, distracted. "Didn't you work in an office or something?" Something I said with a faint smile. And then I told her not every detail but enough. The corporate job, the view from my office, the scandal, the choice to leave. She frowned. "Why didn't you fight it? You could have cleared your name." "Maybe," I said. "But that would have taken years. Years of lawyers' stress media coverage. And you were 6. I wasn't going to let my name or yours be dragged through headlines." I chose peace over prestige. She was quiet for a long time. I could see her processing it, the way her brows knit together when she's thinking. "So you gave it all up for me?" I met her eyes. "I gave it up for us." For a moment I thought I saw her walls crack. But then she shook her head slightly. "I mean, I get it, but don't you ever regret it? I'd hate to spend my life in one place doing the same thing." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so her. She couldn't see yet that the life she feared was one I had chosen with my eyes open. "No," I said simply. "I don't regret it. The job I have now doesn't define me any less than the one I had before. It just defines me differently." She didn't say anything else. We watched TV until she went to bed, leaving me alone with the hum of the fridge and the weight of the conversation. It wasn't the breakthrough I'd hoped for, but seeds don't grow overnight. And I had just planted one. Claire's graduation party was supposed to be one of the proudest moments of my life. I'd been saving for it quietly for months, slipping extra tips into an envelope, picking up a few catering shifts on my days off. I wanted her to feel celebrated, to know that all the long nights and early mornings were worth it. We rented the back hall of the community center, decorated it with strings of white lights, and set out platters of food from the diner. Friends, relatives, her classmates, everyone showed up. Claire in her cap and gown looked radiant. I had planned to say a few words, but she insisted she wanted to give the main speech. "It's my night," she said with a grin, "and I want to thank the people who got me here." I didn't think much of it. In fact, I thought it was sweet. Until she started talking. She stood at the microphone, her voice confident and smooth. She thanked her professors for seeing her potential. She thanked her friends for keeping her motivated. She even thanked her late father for instilling ambition in her. But when it came to me, there was no thank you. Not even a passing mention. Instead, she laughed lightly and said, Of course, I've learned a lot about what I don't want for my future. I know I want to aim higher. I don't want to just settle into an apron and stay in one place my whole life. A few people chuckled. The sound was sharp in my ears. I kept my face still, my hands folded on the table. But inside, something crumbled not because of the jab itself, but because it told me she didn't just misunderstand me. She was using me as the example of a life she considered beneath her. After the speech, people came over to congratulate her, hugging her, snapping pictures. I slipped into the kitchen to refill the punch bowl, needing a moment to breathe. Sam, who'd come from the diner to help, followed me in. I heard what she said. He murmured, his jaw tight. "It's fine," I lied. "It's her night." But it wasn't fine. Not at all. Later that evening, as we cleaned up, Claire bounced around the room laughing with her friends. When she passed by me, I said quietly, "You know you didn't have to put me down to make a point." She blinked, surprised. "I wasn't putting you down, Mom. I was just being honest. I mean, you've always said you wanted me to have more opportunities than you did." "Yes," I said. "More opportunities. Not less respect." Her smile faltered for just a second before she turned away. "You're reading too much into it." That night, after everyone left, I sat in the empty hall with the string lights still glowing overhead. The sound of Claire's laughter with her friends still echoed faintly from the parking lot. And that's when something in me shifted. I realized that trying to convince her with conversations wasn't working. I could tell her about the corporate job I'd left. I could tell her about the hours I put in the community I'd built, the lives I'd touched. But she didn't believe it mattered. Not yet. The only thing that would change her mind was seeing me succeed in a way that fit her definition of visible, undeniable accomplishment. 2 weeks later, that opportunity walked right through the diner's front door. Marlene, the owner, sat down at the counter with a folder in her hands. "Linda, I need to talk to you," she said. I wiped my hands on my apron and joined her. Inside the folder were catering contracts, big ones from local businesses and event planners. "I'm slowing down," Marlene said. "My knees can't handle the long hours anymore. I want you to take over managing this side of the business. You'd be co-running the diner with me, ordering supplies, scheduling staff, handling events. And when I retire, it's yours." For a moment, I just stared at her. "Marlene, that's huge." "You've earned it," she said simply. I thought about Claire, about her smirks, her dismissive tone, her idea of noble work. I imagined telling her I was now part owner of the very place she looked down on. But I didn't want to tell her. Not yet. I wanted her to see it with her own eyes without me needing to frame it for her. So I accepted the offer. And I started planning quietly, knowing this was the beginning of something much bigger than a job title. The next chapter of my life wasn't about proving her wrong out of spite. It was about showing her, and maybe reminding myself that there is more than one kind of success. And soon, she'd have no choice but to see it. 2 months into my new role at the diner, I was juggling more than I ever had before. Supplier calls, event bookings, and training new staff, all on top of my usual shifts. It was exhausting, but I loved it. I could feel the place shifting under my hands, becoming sharper, more efficient, more alive. Claire didn't know any of this yet. I wanted her to find out naturally through the results. The reveal almost happened sooner than I expected, but not in the way I'd hoped. It was a Sunday afternoon, and we were at my sister Margaret's house for her annual family barbecue. My relatives were scattered around the yard, kids playing tag, uncles arguing about baseball, the smell of grilled corn mixing with charcoal smoke. Claire was sitting at a picnic table with two of her cousins, all of them sipping lemonade and talking about careers. I was a few feet away refilling the coleslaw bowl when I caught a sentence that made me freeze. "I mean, I just don't want to end up like Mom," Claire was saying, her tone casual but cutting. "Stuck in one place wearing the same uniform every day. I want something bigger." One cousin laughed uncomfortably. The other muttered something about different paths. But the words hung there heavy and sharp, the kind of words that leave a sting, even when they're not meant for your ears. I didn't confront her right there. I didn't want to make a scene at Margaret's. Instead, I carried the coleslaw to the table, smiled politely, and kept my eyes on the food. But inside, my resolve hardened like steel. She thought I was stuck. She thought my uniform was a cage. She didn't see that it was actually a set of keys I was learning to use to open new doors. And if she couldn't respect the life I had built, maybe she'd respect what I was about to build next. That night, back at home, I went into planning mode. The diner had untapped potential. We were the go-to breakfast spot in town, but the catering side could be a goldmine if we handled it right. I started small meeting with local business owners, offering package deals for corporate lunches, pitching event catering to wedding planners. I stayed up late researching menu designs and presentation ideas. I invested part of my savings into upgrading our delivery equipment so food would arrive looking as good as it did in the diner. Every day I came home tired, my hands sore, my feet aching. But every day I also came home with something new, a signed contract, a new lead, a staff member who was excited to grow with us. One Thursday evening, after a 12-hour day, I walked in to find Claire at the kitchen table surrounded by internship applications. Busy? I asked. She nodded. Just trying to figure out which company will give me the best launch pad for my career. I want to get into a place where I can really climb, not stay flat forever. The words weren't meant as a jab, but they landed like one. I forced a smile. Sounds like you've got a plan. She didn't ask about my day, and I didn't offer. Some things are best revealed when they're too big to be ignored. The breakthrough came in the form of an opportunity I hadn't expected: the town's annual harvest festival. It was the biggest event of the year, drawing hundreds of visitors. The committee usually hired an outside caterer from the city, but their first choice had dropped out last minute. Marlene and I jumped on it. We offered a menu that blended diner favorites with elevated seasonal dishes: maple-glazed pork sliders, roasted squash soup in bread bowls, apple crisp with cinnamon whipped cream. The committee accepted. We had 3 weeks to prepare. The weeks that followed were a blur. I coordinated with farmers for fresh produce, hired temporary staff, and worked with Sam to design a serving setup that could handle a crowd. The whole diner team rallied, their excitement matching mine. Claire barely noticed. She was deep in her own world, classes, friends, and a boyfriend I'd only met twice. Then, the night before the festival, she finally asked, "So, what's this big thing you've been working on?" Marlene mentioned it when I saw her at the grocery store. "It's the Harvest Festival," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "We're catering it this year." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Really? That's a lot of people." "Yes," I said simply. "It is." She didn't press further, but I saw the flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Festival day dawned clear and bright. We set up our food tents in the town square, the air rich with the smell of roasting pork and baking apples. People lined up before we were even ready to serve. I moved between stations like a conductor, checking plating, refilling supplies, greeting customers. Everywhere I turned, someone was thanking us, praising the food, asking for business cards. Local reporters stopped by for photos. And then I spotted Claire standing near the edge of the crowd with her friends. She was watching me, not with the usual detached expression, but with something sharper, more focused. When she caught my eye, I gave her a quick nod and kept moving. By the end of the day, we had sold out of everything. The festival committee thanked us on stage, calling us the heart and flavor of this year's event. The crowd actually applauded. As we packed up, Claire walked over. "That was impressive," she admitted. "You were running the whole thing like—" She paused, searching for the word. "Like a business owner." I smiled just a little. "That's because I am." Her eyes widened. "Wait. What I didn't explain." "Not yet." I just let the words hang there like the first note of a song she'd have to hear the rest of later. The Monday after the Harvest Festival, I walked into the diner to find Marlene waiting for me at a corner booth, a stack of papers in front of her, and that look on her face that meant she'd made a decision. "Sit," she said, sliding a mug of coffee toward me. I sat curious. "What's going on?" She tapped the papers. "You did something at the festival that I couldn't have done. You pulled the team together, handled the pressure, kept the customers happy, and made us a lot of money. More than I expected. It's time we make it official. You're co-managing the diner with me. You'll handle events, catering, supplier negotiations, and day-to-day operations when I'm not here." I blinked at her. "Marlene, that's a huge jump." "You've earned it," she said. "And I'm not slowing down forever. But this place is going to need someone to carry it forward when I can't. That person is you." I stared at the papers, the formal agreement, the raise, the profit-sharing terms. I'd gone from server to co-manager in less than a year. I could already picture the changes I wanted to make: new menus, expanded hours, maybe even a second location one day. But I also knew what Claire would say. So I decided not to tell her right away. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I wanted her to see the results before she saw the title. That evening I came home to find her sprawled on the couch, laptop open, phone in her hand. She looked up briefly. "How was work?" she asked in that absent, polite way you ask someone when you're not really listening. "Good," I said simply. "Busy." She smirked faintly. "You're always busy. I wish you'd take that energy and put it into something bigger, like open a boutique or start your own company. Not just keep doing the same thing." I folded my coat over a chair and met her eyes. "Not everything that grows has to be uprooted." She rolled her eyes. "Mom, you've been at that diner forever. You can't tell me you're not scared of getting stuck." I didn't answer. Not because I agreed, but because I knew words wouldn't get through to her. Not yet. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. My role as co-manager meant longer hours and more responsibility. I met with local businesses to pitch lunch contracts, negotiated better supplier deals, and even launched a social media campaign for the diner. It was working. Sales were up, catering bookings doubled, and we started seeing customers from neighboring towns who'd heard about us through word of mouth. Still, Claire didn't notice or didn't care to. She was buried in her own projects, preparing for her final semester and talking endlessly about job applications in real companies. Then one Friday evening, she wandered into the diner to grab a coffee before meeting friends. She stood at the counter, glancing around, and her eyes caught on the framed article on the wall, a feature from the local paper titled "Maple Grove Diner, the local business that's stepping up its game." She read it, her brow furrowing. "You're in this," she said slowly. I wiped down the counter. "Yes, they called you the operations lead." "That's one of my titles," I said casually. She hesitated. "So, you're like in charge. In charge of a lot?" "Yes." She didn't say anything more, but I could see the gears turning in her head. That night, she came into the kitchen while I was making tea. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. Why do you work so hard for the diner? I mean, I get that it's your job, but you act like it's yours." I smiled faintly. "Because in a way it is." She tilted her head. "But it's still a diner. Don't you want more than that?" I met her gaze steadily. "Claire, I already have more. You just can't see it yet." Her resistance only grew over the next week. At dinner one night, she mentioned an opening at a corporate chain restaurant, a management trainee program she said could be a stepping stone to something bigger. "You should apply," she said. "It pays more and looks better on paper than being a diner server." I set down my fork. "I'm not a server anymore, Claire." "I know," she said quickly. "But even so, don't you want a title that sounds, I don't know, more important?" I smiled, but there was steel in my voice. "Importance isn't in the title. It's in the work." She sighed and shook her head like I was being stubborn. Maybe I was. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't just building a business now. I was building proof the kind that would be impossible to ignore. And the day she finally saw it for what it was, the conversation between us would change forever. By the start of spring, the diner was busier than it had ever been in my 12 years there. Our catering business was taking off office lunches, weddings, fundraisers, and I was in the middle of negotiating our biggest job, yet a contract with the county courthouse to cater their monthly staff meetings and events. If we landed it, it would mean steady high-volume orders, the kind of deal that could double our catering revenue overnight. I didn't tell Claire. Not because I wanted to keep it a secret, but because I'd learned something if I mentioned a new opportunity before it became real, she'd find a way to tear it down. I wanted her to see the finished picture, not the half-drawn sketch. One night, about a week before the courthouse was set to make their decision, I came home late. My hair smelled faintly of grilled onions and coffee, my feet throbbed, and my hands were still sticky from the lemonade syrup I'd spilled earlier. Claire was at the kitchen table with her laptop, a spreadsheet open, her expression tight with concentration. "You look dead," she said, glancing at me. "Long day," I replied, kicking off my shoes. She closed her laptop. "Mom, I don't get it. You work harder than anyone I know, and for what? To keep doing the same thing forever. You could take that experience and get a better job somewhere else. One that pays more. One where you're not on your feet all day." I leaned against the counter, too tired to hide the edge in my voice. "Claire, what makes you think what I do isn't already better?" She gave a half laugh. "Come on. You're managing a diner in a town where everyone knows everyone. That's not growth. That's just staying comfortable." "Comfortable," I repeated. "I've been working 12-hour days for months, learning new skills, building something bigger than I've ever built before. Does that sound comfortable to you?" She folded her arms. "It sounds like you're scared to try for something outside your bubble." The conversation ended there, but the words sat in me like a splinter. She saw my world as a bubble when to me it felt like the whole town, a living, breathing network of people I served, connected, and built relationships with every day. She didn't understand yet that success isn't just about climbing higher. Sometimes it's about building deeper. A few days later, I got the call. The courthouse contract was ours. The event coordinator said they'd been impressed by our professionalism at the Harvest Festival and our menu flexibility. I hung up the phone in the diner's back office and just sat there for a moment, letting the weight of it sink in. This was the kind of deal that could put us on the map far beyond our town limits. The first order under the new contract was a lunch for 60 people. We planned everything meticulously: fresh-baked rolls, slow-roasted turkey, roasted vegetables, and homemade pies for dessert. I oversaw every detail from the garnishes to the delivery schedule. When the food arrived at the courthouse, the staff actually applauded. By the end of the event, we had 3 new catering inquiries from other county departments. It was the momentum I'd been working toward. That evening, I came home earlier than usual, still buzzing from the day's success. Claire was on the couch watching some business reality show where contestants pitched startups to investors. "How was work?" she asked without looking away from the screen. "Good," I said. "Actually, great." She glanced at me. "Yeah," I sat down across from her. "We just landed the county courthouse contract. It's a big deal. Steady monthly orders, more exposure, more revenue." She raised an eyebrow. "The courthouse, huh? That's something, I guess." "Something," I repeated, my tone sharper than I meant. "Claire, this could double our catering business. It opens doors to bigger events, more staff, maybe even expansion." She shrugged. "I mean, I'm happy for you, but it's still just the diner, Mom." For a second, I wanted to snap to tell her that just the diner was feeding half the town, employing locals, and becoming a respected name in the community. But I bit my tongue. She wasn't ready to hear it. So instead, I let the silence speak. I went to my room, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat at my desk to review the next month's bookings. If Claire couldn't see the value yet, I'd just keep building it until she couldn't look away. 2 weeks later, that moment came closer than I expected. We were catering a charity gala for the local hospital, an event where half the town's influential people would be. I was overseeing the buffet when I spotted Claire across the room with some of her friends. She was dressed elegantly, chatting in a circle of young professionals. She didn't notice me at first, but her friends did. They waved one of them, saying, "Oh, your mom's running the catering." "That's amazing. This food is incredible." I caught the flash of surprise in Claire's eyes. She hadn't expected me to be the one in charge here. She gave me a quick nod from across the room, almost like an acknowledgement, not quite respect yet, but a step toward it. Driving home that night, I thought about the long road ahead. She still didn't fully understand, but the cracks were showing in her certainty. And with every event, every contract, every public acknowledgement, those cracks would widen. Until one day she'd see the truth. I wasn't stuck. I was building something solid enough for both of us to stand on. The morning the news crew showed up at the diner, I almost told them to come back another day. We were short 2 servers. The dishwasher was acting up again, and I had 3 catering orders to finalize before noon. But Marlene wouldn't let me brush it off. "Linda," she said, pulling me toward the door, "this is your moment. You've been running half this place for months' time to let the rest of the world see it." The crew from Local Life News was small, just a cameraman, a sound guy, and a smiling reporter named Jenna. She explained they were doing a segment on local women driving community business, and my name had come up more than once during their research. I felt my cheeks warm. More than once, Jenna grinned. "Apparently, you've been making quite the impression." They followed me for 2 hours, filming as I moved between tables, chatted with regulars, coordinated with the kitchen, and checked on the morning's catering prep. I tried to pretend the camera wasn't there, but it was impossible not to feel its weight. Jenna asked questions while I worked. "What do you love most about what you do?" "The people," I said without hesitation. "Every plate we serve is a connection to someone's day. A birthday, a lunch break, a moment of comfort. That matters to me." "What keeps you going on the hard days?" "The same thing," I replied. "And knowing that this place is part of something bigger than just a meal." By the time they packed up, I was sweaty, flour-dusted, and certain half my sentences had been nonsense. But 3 days later, when the segment aired, I was stunned. They'd edited it beautifully, shots of me laughing with customers, carrying trays with ease, even a slow-motion clip of me handing a slice of pie to a little boy who grinned like I'd given him gold. The narration called me the steady heartbeat of Maple Grove Diner and a prime example of leadership rooted in community. Marlene cried. Sam clapped me on the back. And then my phone buzzed. It was Claire. "Saw you on TV. Didn't know you were, like, the face of the diner now?" I stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "It's part of my job." A few seconds later, another text came through. "You looked professional, like really in charge." I smiled to myself but didn't answer right away. That evening, she came into the kitchen while I was making tea. "I watched the whole thing," she said. "They made you look important." I raised an eyebrow. "I am important, Claire. Just not in the way you've been taught to measure it." She shifted awkwardly. "I didn't mean it like I guess I didn't realize people saw you that way." "They've always seen me that way," I said gently. "You're just seeing it for the first time." The next few weeks were different. Not completely, she still had her moments of dismissiveness, but I caught her watching me more closely when she stopped by the diner. She noticed the way people greeted me, the way the staff looked to me for decisions, the way I kept everything moving without raising my voice. One Saturday morning, she came in with a group of friends. As they left, I overheard one of them say, "Your mom's a boss." And Claire, instead of correcting her or brushing it off, actually smiled and said, "Yeah, she is." It was small, but it mattered. Then came the City Food Festival. For the first time, we were invited to have a booth and opportunity to showcase our food to a much larger audience. It was competitive. Only 20 vendors were chosen. I threw myself into the planning menus display marketing. The festival drew thousands of visitors, and I wanted our booth to be the one they remembered. On the day of the event, Claire surprised me by showing up early. "Need an extra pair of hands?" she asked. I almost dropped the box I was carrying. "You want to help?" She shrugged. "Might be fun. Besides, I want to see what all the fuss is about." She worked beside me for 6 hours straight, taking orders, plating samples, chatting with customers. At one point, she leaned over and whispered, "People really love this food." "They do," I said, smiling. "And they come back. Because they know we care." By the end of the day, our booth had a line down the block and we'd sold out of everything. The festival organizers even gave us a crowd favorite ribbon to hang in the diner. As we packed up, Claire said quietly, "You were right. This isn't just a job." "No," I said. "It's a life. One I chose." That night, she posted a picture of the two of us at the booth on her social media. The caption stopped me cold. "Proud of my mom today. She's built something real." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing to one I'd ever gotten. And for now, that was enough. The call came on a Monday morning just as we were finishing the breakfast rush. It was Gloria from the community center, her voice tight. "There was a fire at the hospital's east wing last night," she said. "The pediatric ward is damaged. Some families have been displaced while repairs are made. We're organizing a fundraiser this Saturday. Can you cater?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yes. Whatever you need." This wasn't just about food. This was about pulling the community together in a moment of crisis, something the diner had done many times before, but never on this scale. I called an emergency staff meeting that afternoon. Sam, Marta, and the rest of the crew gathered around the counter while I laid out the plan. "We're feeding a lot of people," I said. "Families, hospital staff, donors. This isn't just about showing up, it's about showing up big." Marta grinned. "Then we go all out. Comfort food. The kind that makes people feel cared for." By the time we were done brainstorming, the menu looked like a hug on a plate. Slow-cooked beef stew, fresh rolls, roasted vegetables, apple pies, and trays of cookies for the kids. The next few days were a blur of prep. Between managing the diner's regular business and coordinating donations for the event, I barely sat down. Local farmers dropped off produce for free. The bakery down the street donated flour. Even customers stopped by with bags of sugar or cartons of eggs. It was one of those moments when you could feel the town's heartbeat in every gesture. On Saturday morning, we loaded the catering van to bursting and headed to the community center. Volunteers were already setting up tables, arranging chairs, and stringing banners that read, "Together for our hospital." As we unloaded, I heard someone call my name. I turned to see Claire walking toward me in jean sneakers and a ponytail, no makeup, holding a stack of serving trays. "Marlene said you might need an extra hand," she said. I smiled. "Always." For the next 6 hours, we served nonstop. Claire worked the drink station, refilling cups and chatting with families. I moved between the buffet tables, checking on the food, making sure no one's plate went empty. At one point, a nurse from the pediatric ward came over, tears in her eyes. "I can't tell you what this means to us," she said. "The kids have been so scared since the fire. Today they get to feel normal again." Claire was standing beside me when she said it. I saw my daughter's eyes flicker, her expression softening. Later, during the silent auction, the event coordinator took the stage to thank the sponsors. When she got to us, she said, "And a special thank you to Linda Carver and the Maple Grove Diner, who not only catered today's meal, but refused payment. They did this out of love for this town." The crowd erupted in applause. People turned to look at me, smiling, nodding. Claire clapped too, not just a polite clap, but the kind where her palms met hard like she meant it. When the event wrapped up, we were all exhausted. The catering van was empty, the community center smelled like coffee and pie, and the donation tally was higher than anyone expected. As we loaded the last of the trays into the van, Claire said quietly, "You didn't get paid for today?" I shook my head. Some things are worth more than a paycheck. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, I don't think I've ever seen so many people so grateful to one person before." I smiled. That's not just me. That's the diner. That's all of us. But I knew what she meant, and I knew something had shifted for her. That night, she came into the living room while I was putting my feet up. "Mom," she said, "I was wrong before. About your job. About what it means." I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let her find the words. I used to think success was just big titles, big salaries. But today, she shook her head, smiling faintly. "Today I saw you run something better than any boardroom." It wasn't a full apology, but it was the clearest acknowledgement yet. The fundraiser had done more than raise money for the hospital. It had given my daughter a front row seat to the quiet kind of power that comes from showing up for people. And though she didn't know it yet, the next few weeks would give her an even bigger reason to see my work and me differently. The Monday after the fundraiser, the diner was busier than usual. People who hadn't set foot in Maple Grove for years came in just to say thank you, shaking my hand, asking how they could help with the next charity event. It was humbling and a little overwhelming. We'd always been a community hub, but this was different. This was the whole town seeing us not just as a place to eat, but as a place that mattered. Around mid-morning, the bell over the door jingled, and Claire walked in with two of her friends. She slid into a booth by the window, and I could see them looking around with curiosity, like they were seeing the diner for the first time. I went over to take their order, and before I could say anything, one of her friends, a tall girl with auburn hair, said, "Your mom is kind of a big deal here, isn't she?" Claire looked slightly caught off guard. "Uh, yeah, I guess she is." Her other friend grinned. "We heard about the hospital fundraiser. People are still talking about it on campus." She turned to me. "You basically fed half the town for free. That's incredible." I thanked her, keeping my smile warm, but I couldn't help noticing the way Claire avoided my eyes. She wasn't embarrassed this time, she just seemed thoughtful. When their food came, I heard snippets of conversation from the next table over. "Friend, you must be so proud of her." Claire, "Yeah, I am." The words were soft, but I caught them. And for a moment I had to step into the kitchen to keep from tearing up. That same week, I got a call from the local radio station inviting me to do an interview about the diner that brings the community together. It was a short segment, just 10 minutes, but it aired during the morning commute and reached a surprising number of people. The next day, a catering request came in from a law firm in the city an hour away. They'd heard about us from one of the attorneys who'd been at the fundraiser. It was the kind of job that would have intimidated me a year ago, but now I was ready. We spent 2 weeks preparing for that law firm luncheon. It was an upscale menu: roasted salmon, wild rice, pilaf, gourmet salads. Presentation mattered, so I invested in new chafing dishes and serving platters. When the day came, I oversaw the setup myself. The managing partner shook my hand and said, "If you ever decide to expand to the city, give me a call. You've got something special here." It was the highest compliment he could have given, not because I wanted to move to the city, but because it meant our little diner's reputation had jumped beyond town borders. That weekend, Claire came home from a study session and found me at the dining table going through invoices. "Working again," she teased, but her voice didn't have that old bite to it. "Always," I said. "We just catered a luncheon for a big law firm in the city." She raised her eyebrows. "The city? That's... wow." She hesitated, then added, "You know, I told one of my classmates about you. He didn't believe a diner could do high-end catering. I showed him the pictures from the fundraiser, and he was like, 'Okay, that's legit.'" I laughed. "Glad to have your marketing support." She smiled, and for the first time, it didn't feel like there was a wall between us. The shift was subtle, but it was there. She still had her ambitions, big job titles, corporate offices, but she was starting to respect that my path had its own kind of weight. The final change, though, was still coming, and it would happen in a way neither of us expected in the middle of a celebration that wasn't about the diner at all. It started with an invitation. The town council was holding its annual Community Awards banquet, and I got a letter saying I was being honored with the Local Impact Award. I almost laughed. The award usually went to longtime business owners or retired teachers. When I told Claire, she looked genuinely surprised. "They're giving you an award?" "Yes," I said. "For, you know, just the diner." She had the grace to look a little sheepish. "Okay, fair. That's pretty amazing." The banquet was held in the community center's grand hall, the same place Claire's graduation party had been, the same place she'd made that sly comment about apron life. This time, the tables were set with white linens, the lights glowed warm, and people in suits and dresses mingled with wine glasses in hand. When my name was called, I walked to the stage to applause that felt different. It wasn't polite. It was warm, genuine, full of pride. The councilwoman presenting the award said, "Linda Carver has shown us that leadership isn't about titles or offices. It's about heart dedication and the willingness to serve in every sense of the word." I caught Claire's eye in the crowd. She was clapping harder than anyone. Afterward, she came up to me holding the award in her hands like it was fragile. "You know," she said quietly, "I think I get it now. You built something that people trust. Something that lasts." I smiled. That was the plan all along. She didn't apologize outright, that wasn't Claire's way. But the respect in her voice was apology enough. And for me, that was worth more than any paycheck or title. It was about a week after the Community Awards banquet when Claire's real shift began, not in quiet moments between the two of us, but out in the open where she couldn't brush it off or pretend she hadn't heard. One Thursday evening, she came into the diner with a group of classmates after their late lecture. They filled one of the long booths, ordering milkshakes, fries, and slices of pie. I was in the middle of a catering order, so Sam took their table, but I stopped by to say hello. "Hi, Mom," Claire said, trying to play it cool in front of her friends. One of them, a tall young man with a kind smile, grinned up at me. "You're the famous Linda, right? Claire's told us about you." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, all good things, I hope." He laughed. "Are you kidding? You're a legend. My uncle works at the courthouse and won't shut up about the catering you did there. Said it was the best they've ever had." Another classmate chimed in. "And my mom was at that hospital fundraiser. She said you basically saved the day." Claire's cheeks flushed and she glanced at me almost shyly. "Yeah, she's pretty great." It was the first time I'd ever heard her say that in front of other people. It landed differently than any private conversation we'd had because here, there was no defensiveness in her voice. No reluctant admission. Just pride. I didn't linger at the table, the kitchen was buzzing, but as I walked away, I heard one of her friends say, "Your mom's kind of a boss." And this time, Claire laughed. The next day, the shift went even deeper. Claire had invited me to a networking mixer hosted by her university's business program. I'd been hesitant. These things were usually all about exchanging cards and talking about market penetration or strategic partnerships, but she insisted. When we arrived, the room was buzzing with students and faculty. Claire went to get us drinks, and I struck up a conversation with an older man standing nearby. Turned out he was one of Claire's professors. When she returned, he smiled at her. "Claire, you didn't tell me your mother is the Linda Carver from Maple Grove Diner. We studied your fundraiser case in our nonprofit management class last week." Her head snapped toward him. "You... what?" He nodded. "It's a perfect example of grassroots leadership and community mobilization. You should be proud." Claire's expression was priceless, a mix of shock, embarrassment, and something softer. The ride home was quiet for a while. Then she said, "You know, I used to think I was embarrassed by what you do, but now, I think I was just afraid." "Afraid?" I asked gently. "Yeah, afraid that if I ended up like you, it would mean I'd failed. She looked out the window. But I see now that you built something, and you did it without needing permission from anyone. That's kind of amazing. I didn't say anything right away. Sometimes silence lets the truth settle deeper. Over the next few weeks, little things started changing. She'd pop into the diner and bring coffee to the staff. She asked questions about our catering contracts, not in a skeptical way, but with genuine curiosity. One afternoon, she even stayed through the lunch rush to help bus tables when we were short-staffed. As we wiped down the last booth together, she said, "This is harder than it looks." I grinned. "Told you." She laughed, and for the first time in a long time, the air between us felt easy. The real turning point, though, came when I was invited to speak at the town's small business panel. The room was packed local shop owners, aspiring entrepreneurs, and even a few city investors curious about small-town growth. I talked about the diner, sure, but mostly I talked about the power of relationships, about how success isn't just built in boardrooms, but in every moment you choose to show up for people. When it was over, Claire came up to me, her eyes bright. "You were incredible. Like TED Talk level incredible." I smiled. "Thanks." She hesitated. "I think I've been measuring success all wrong." Driving home that night, I realized something. She wasn't just beginning to respect me, she was starting to learn from me. And maybe, just maybe, she'd take those lessons into her own life. But there was still one more moment to come, one that would cement everything. And it would happen when she finally saw my work not as just the diner, but as something worth defending. It was a Wednesday afternoon when everything nearly went sideways. The lunch rush was already in full swing when a catering order for a corporate luncheon got mixed up. Half the entrees were missing. The desserts had been delivered to the wrong address, and the client was calling every 5 minutes demanding answers. Sam looked ready to pull his hair out. Marta was juggling 2 pans on the stove, and the front counter line was nearly out the door. That was the moment Claire walked in. She'd been in the area for a meeting with a professor and thought she'd stop by for coffee. Instead, she walked into chaos. I didn't have time to explain. I just grabbed her arm and said, "Follow me." Within seconds, I had her helping refill coffee for waiting customers, while I got on the phone with the delivery driver to redirect the missing desserts. I switched between calming the corporate client, promising their food would be there in 20 minutes, and directing Marta on how to plate the remaining entrees so they could leave immediately. When Sam dropped a tray of silverware, I bent down to help, still on the phone, still smiling at the customers nearby as if nothing was wrong. Claire followed me from table to table, watching as I kept a dozen fires from getting out of control, literally and figuratively. By the time the catering driver returned with the missing desserts, the lunch crowd had been served, the client was satisfied, and the diner felt calm again. I didn't realize how much she'd been paying attention until the rush was over, and we sat down for 5 minutes in the corner booth. "You didn't lose it," she said, almost in disbelief. "I mean, everything was going wrong, but you stayed in control." I smiled faintly. "That's the job." "No," she shook her head. "That's leadership. And I think I finally get it." She hesitated, then looked me straight in the eye. "I owe you an apology for all the times I made you feel like what you do isn't important. I think I didn't understand because I didn't want to. I thought admitting it would mean letting go of this idea I had of what success should look like. But watching you today," her voice cracked, "you're not just running a diner, you're running people's trust. And that's harder than anything I've ever done." For a moment, I couldn't speak. All the years of little cuts, the comments, the dismissals, the quiet judgments, they didn't disappear, but they shifted. Her words didn't erase the past, but they finally bridged the gap between us. "You don't need to apologize for wanting your own path," I said finally. "But you do need to understand that mine is just as valid." She nodded. "I do. Now I do." From that day forward, something fundamental changed. She didn't just stop making the little digs, she started defending me. One evening, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. "No, my mom doesn't just wait tables. She basically runs a business. She employs people, manages contracts, and keeps the place running like clockwork." I couldn't do what she does. It was a quiet victory, but one I savored. The real test came a week later when a city investor, someone she admired, stopped by the diner to pitch me on selling and letting them rebrand it into a trendier restaurant. "I could make you a lot of money," he said smoothly. "You'd never have to work another day in your life." I was polite, but firm. "This place isn't just about profit, it's about people. That's not something you can rebrand." I thought Claire might jump in on his side. After all, he represented the world she once thought I should be part of. But instead, she leaned forward and said, "My mom's right. You can't buy what she's built here." I didn't say anything then. But when the investor left and we were alone, I touched her hand lightly. "Thank you," I said. She smiled. "For once, I think I'm the one learning from you." The next step in our journey would come at a moment of celebration, one that neither of us could have predicted would feel so full circle. The first Saturday of summer was the diner's annual Customer Appreciation Day, an event Marlene had started years ago, but this time it felt different. This year, we weren't just giving out free coffee and muffins. We were celebrating the diner's growth, the catering success, the community projects we'd pulled off, and in a way, the fact that we'd made it through a year that had tested us more than any other. We'd set up tents in the parking lot with live music, free pie slices, games for kids, and even a raffle for gift baskets filled with goods donated by local businesses. It was more than an event, it was a thank you letter to the people who'd supported us. And for the first time, Claire was by my side, from the very start. At 7 a.m., she was helping Sam set up tables, teasing Marta about her world-famous cinnamon rolls, and greeting early arrivals with a smile that wasn't forced. Watching her move through the crowd, chatting with people she barely knew, I felt something in my chest loosen, like a knot I'd been carrying for years was finally unwinding. She wasn't just helping me, she was part of this. By mid-morning, the place was packed. Old regulars hugged me, kids ran around with powdered sugar on their faces, and customers told stories about the first time they'd eaten here. I was pouring coffee for Mrs. Thompson when I heard Claire behind me laughing with a couple I'd catered a wedding for years ago. "This is your daughter?" the bride asked. "She must be so proud of you." Claire didn't hesitate. "I am. She's built something here that matters. I used to think I wanted something completely different for my life. But I get it now. This is success." Her words were quiet enough that only the three of us heard them, but they landed in my heart with more weight than a public speech ever could. Later, as the raffle winners were announced and the band played a cover of an old favorite, we slipped away to sit on the hood of my car looking at the crowd. I didn't understand before Claire said, "When I was younger, I thought noble meant prestigious, fancy offices, big paychecks. But you've shown me it's about the way people look at you when you walk into a room, about knowing you've made their lives better even in small ways." I smiled, watching a little boy run past clutching a free cookie like it was treasure. "That's all I ever wanted you to see." She was quiet for a long moment. "Then I'm sorry it took me so long to get here." I didn't tell her it was okay. I didn't need to. We were here now, and that was enough. As the sun began to dip, casting the whole parking lot in golden light, I thought about the years between us, the misunderstandings, the sharp words, the stubborn pride on both sides. I thought about the fact that I had never stopped showing up, even when she didn't see me. And now, she was seeing me. I know there will still be moments when she questions my choices, just as I'll sometimes worry about hers. That's the nature of family love, mixed with its own brand of friction. But now there's a foundation under us that wasn't there before: respect. It's not flashy, but it's strong. Strong enough to carry us into whatever comes next. Reflection. If you've ever had someone in your life belittle the work you do or fail to see its value, know this. Your worth is not defined by their understanding of it. It's in the consistency of showing up in the relationships you build in the quiet moments where someone realizes they were wrong about you all along. And maybe like me, you'll find that you don't have to convince them with arguments. You just have to live in a way that makes the truth impossible to ignore. So if you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told you weren't enough, remember the work you do with heart honesty and persistence is noble, no matter what the title is. And one day, the people who couldn't see it, they just might become your biggest supporters. If you've had your own moment where someone finally understood your worth, I'd love to hear it. Share it in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you haven't, yet don't stop showing up. Because the day they see you, it's worth every moment of the wait.